Welcome to another episode. I have a very special guest. I can't wait for you to meet him. Let me just bring his bio up to read to you. So I have Matt with me, and Matt is a nutritionist specializing in disordered eating and body image, who has created the Flourishing Athlete, which he's going to talk about today as well, which aims to help athletes and fitness enthusiasts to develop a positive relationship with food, body, and self. His passion for this has been developed from his own experience of body obsession, disordered eating, including binge eating, orthorexic tendencies, and rigid food rules. And Matt is currently finalising a model which he aims to turn into a practical programme for athletes to follow to overcome disordered eating and flourish in sports and life. So without further ado, Matt, welcome to the Body Love Binge podcast.
Thank you. Yeah, pleasure to be here. Thanks so much. And yeah, good to see you and actually meet you in person as well.
Yay. And so you might not know if you've not listened to my podcast yet. And I didn't tell you before we press record because it takes the fun out of it. Before we get going into the juice of your story and the questions that I have planned for you, we go into just 10 random quick fire questions.
Okay, right. Okay, let's do that then. Let's do it.
Are you ready? Let's do it. Okay. Number 1, favorite food.
Oh, chocolate. Love chocolate.
Me too.
Anything chocolatey, not fussy, just chocolate.
What's your favorite brand? I've got to even go deeper into this quick question.
Do you know what I had the other day? My housemate bought me this, very niche. I quite like white chocolate and I love Biscoff as well. So it was a real tie between Biscoff and chocolate. I think it must have been a Kit Kat Chunky that had Biscoff in the middle. So it was like a Biscoff Kit Kat Chunky, white chocolate.
Epic.
That's what it was. So if you find that, you've got to make sure you buy one of those.
I'll be on the search over the weekend. All right, number 2, the best time of day for you and why?
Oh, that's a tough one. Depends on the time of year. So I love it in the summer when the days get longer, and I'm really excited to sort of leading into the summer, where it's sort of evening and it's still light and it's a warm day. So that sort of dusk, late sunset, still warm. I love that time of day. But then I would say generically, I probably would say morning more often than not. But then specifically in the summer, yeah, I like it when it gets late.
I love that. Number 3, cardio or weights? If you had to choose, I know that you want to say both, but
yeah, it's tough. I probably get more enjoyment out of a weights workout. So I would go with weights. I'm not too keen on the pain that a treadmill session brings me. So yeah, we'll go with weights.
And also you can technically, depending on your rep range, make weights cardio-ish.
Yeah, sort of. I mean, I do a lot of my own workouts, I guess, that are sort of quite CrossFit related. So I use weights, but they're targeting different systems in the body, aren't they? So, I mean, it's harsh to just call them a weights versus cardio. But yeah, I'd go with weights. I'd go with weights.
Okay. Number 4, what, if anything, what do you have a love-hate relationship with?
Oh, goodness. If anything. Oh, wow. That's such a hard question. What do I have a love-hate relationship with? Let's say Netflix.
Interesting.
The first thing that came up. I love watching TV. I love a good series. But then my personality is that I will struggle to stop a good series. I could watch it all day, every day, and I will find that tough to resist temptation to do. So I guess we'll go with Netflix, but that's probably a rubbish answer. And when we finish this,
no, that's a really interesting answer, and I feel you. I'm interested though. These are not quick fire because of me. What series are you watching at the moment?
Oh, this isn't actually Netflix. So I said Netflix, but it could go to any sort of streaming, platform, I guess. I'm watching Married at First Sight.
Oh, I've seen some of that.
Married at First Sight Australia. And it is, do you know what? I do love watching rubbish, and it is rubbish. It is just, there's no other way of putting it, but it's such nice switch off TV.
Yes.
The producers have got it down. They know how to want to watch the next episode. So yeah, Married at First Sight Australia is what I'm currently watching, which sounds a bit mad saying out loud, but there we go.
No, I get it. I totally feel you with that. All right. The next question. 3 things you would take to a desert island. I know this is such an old question, but I love the answers.
See, these people, I love Desert Island Dis. And they normally prep this answer, and I haven't. 3 things I would take to a desert island. Oh wow, what a loaded question. There's so much in this. Can you take like
Anything you want.
oh, do you know what? I'm gonna be so boring. I'm gonna say like a phone, right? With a solar powered adaptable phone
Ooh,
charger,
nice.
um, and a hammock.
That's a really good answers, to be fair.
You know what? I'm well happy with those answers considering I've not that's completely on the spot. There's been no thought gone into that. So yeah, then you've got access to but there probably wouldn't even be internet, would there? So that's
Oh yeah. Oh,
oh, I don't know. Anyway, there we go. That was me assuming there'd be internet.
I love it. I love the way your brain worked because when you said a phone initially, I was like, wait, come on. And then you backed it up with
And then
solar
you've got to have
power
somewhere
charger.
to chill in to watch your to to be entertained. I get bored very quickly. So maybe that would be my biggest downfall, actually having a phone, because maybe I'd get stuck on a TV series and not actually manage.
Yeah, on Married at First Sight, the
Yeah,
Island edition.
exactly. Maybe it would be my downfall. But there we go. That's what came to my head first. So we'll go with
No, I
that.
love it. Thanks for playing along. Okay, number 7, we've got 10 altogether. In one sentence, this is more of a serious question.
Yeah.
In one sentence, what has your eating disorder taught you?
Mm. I wouldn't ever. I always find the language as well really tough to know whether or not I would classify myself as having a I know when I never had a diagnosed eating disorder. I certainly had bigger problems with my body image. I would certainly say I would have had, or I would have been diagnosable with probably muscle dysmorphia,
Mm,
um, and muscularity orientated disordered eating. Um, and there's not a category of this, I'm making this up, but also probably athletic orientated disordered eating, in that it wasn't just geared towards muscularity, it was also geared towards leanness and performance as well. So an obsession with protein and an
mhm,
anxiety around not being able to track meticulously or work out. A lot of mine sort of also stemmed from exercise as well, or went into that realm as well. So sort of my relationship with exercise as well. Um, so what's the question again? One thing I've learned. You said one thing I've
mhm.
learned from it.
Yeah, so from your experience of eating disorder, disordered eating,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, one thing I've learned. How this one's going to sound weird to start with, but maybe it'll make sense when we get the conversation
Mhm,
going. But one thing I've learned is just how disordered it is, because at the time it wasn't disordered to me,
mhm,
and I think in the population that I'm really interested in helping in terms of athletes, it's so normalized, so normalized, specifically disordered eating. I mean, when we get into the depths of certain types of eating disorders, um, specifically restrictive eating disorders without maybe binge eating. So obviously the sort of one that comes to head is anorexia nervosa, or relative energy deficiency in sports, and people have a low body weight. You can get some physical health. Well, there's a lot more, let's say, physical health risks,
yeah.
which are maybe more obvious to pick up, and
Mhm,
maybe might be picked up by a physician or your GP or whatever. Whereas other disordered eating might be masked because you don't exist in
mhm,
a smaller body, or an obviously smaller body. And I think that it's particularly in sports, they're sometimes celebrated. They're not even go under recognized. They're actually sort of celebrated, and not we see it in society where they're celebrated. Weight
mhm.
loss doesn't matter how the weight loss happens, everyone applauds it.
Yeah.
In sport in particular, we associate a certain morality with having a certain body composition, and that can be it can be accepted and it can be celebrated, and it can be something you're praised for. So I think that would be the takeaway: is actually just knowing that what I was doing was disordered, because at the time it was sort of wasn't even aware that
Mm.
tensing in the mirror for a long time before bed and picking apart my body and worrying that I only had 4 instead of 5 protein feedings today, and that the
Oh
last
yeah.
was 30 grams. These kind of things aren't normal and were detracting from my life massively. But at the time, I didn't know that. So yeah, the thing I take away from it is the normality of it, the normality of the disordered eating within an athletic population, which I'm sure we'll discuss.
Yeah,
Uh,
I can't wait. I cannot wait. Okay, we have 3 left.
okay.
If you were the Prime Minister, what's the first thing that you would change?
Oh goodness me! Oh
These
my
aren't
God.
fire questions,
These are
are they?
hard. These are not quick fire questions. I need to get out a notepad and pen. The first thing I would change. Do you know, this is one of those rubbish things where I'm not into politics. So someone
Neither
who's
am I.
politics listen to this and they'll go, this kid doesn't know what he's on about. Affordable housing for all. There you go. Nice
Love
and
it.
simple. Quick fire. There we go.
3 things you love.
This is only hard because I feel like I love a lot of things, not searching, trying to find one thing I love. I love sport. I was going to say I love fitness, but that's far too similar to saying I love sport. So I'm going to veto that one. I love traveling and I love coffee. There
You've
we
got
go.
yourself.
I forgot myself. Oh, right. Sorry. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I forgot myself. There you go. I love myself. I love everyone. We're in. Yeah, there you go.
No, I love it. I remember my coach first asked me that, and then I didn't. Self-love wasn't even in my vocabulary, let alone me actually saying, "Oh yeah, I love myself." But now, whenever anyone asks me what I love, myself first, and then chocolate, my family. Not in no particular order, by the way.
Yeah. That's interesting to hear, different perspective because I've never yeah. And it's funny, isn't it? This weird stickiness around loving yourself because it's so for a lot of people it's very hard to say, isn't it? I don't think we live in a society or culture in a westernized society, should I say?
Especially British. We're British.
Yeah. We're very
We
critical.
apologize for someone bumping into us.
Yeah. We're very critical and very harsh, and we put ourselves last a lot of the time.
Yeah.
People pleasers, aren't we, as a country? But yeah. So yeah, there we go. Love myself. There we go. Put that number
Love
one.
it.
Sort the others
All
out.
right, last question. I reached out to you and asked if you would be on the podcast. Why did you say yes?
Well, I simply wanted the 10 quick fire questions at the beginning.
That you didn't know that was coming.
No. Why did I say? Well, listen. There's a few reasons I said yes. There's me I like expanding the people that I know and I like just having good conversations within this space. And I felt like we'd have a good conversation. I said to you before we started recording that I've heard you do other podcasts as well on other platforms. And I just know that we'd have a good conversation. I feel like I've got a good fit for your podcast as well because I've experienced binge eating and body image problems quite for a long part of my life, shall we say. So I felt like I've got a good story to share, and I think we'll have an interesting conversation. And then also selfishly off the back of it, I'm quite recently putting out my message through this platform, the Flourishing Athlete, and I would love to talk about that as well and talk about the work that you do as well. So it felt like a very fitting podcast to be on with where I'm currently at right now. So yeah, wasn't really a hard decision.
Well, I'm glad you're here, and I would love for you to go into your story. So if we can keep it at, I'm not timing you, but under 15 minutes ish your story, because I know you need to look at the questions I've wrote down because I already know there's so much I want to ask you. But can you just share with us like where you are now compared to where you used to be and how you've got to where you are now?
Sure, yeah. So where am I now? Well, I'm currently in a place where I would identify as being an athlete or fitness lover, probably less of an athlete than I would say I was, let's go 4 or 5 years ago. But that's always been a big part of my life, sports and playing sport and fitness and the gym and all of this. So that's always been a massive part of my life. I currently live in the Midlands. I live in Birmingham. The sport that I enjoy right now is touch rugby, quite a niche sport, quite an upcoming sport. And I used to play that for England. So I played that at an international level. It's come on leaps and bounds, to be fair, in the past couple of years, which is brilliant. And because it's quite a developing sport, is touch rugby. But it's a fantastic sport. It's got a fantastic community. When I was playing touch rugby, I was probably when I was most critical of my body. I had a very negative body image. As I said, I probably had undiagnosed muscle dysmorphia, which is a subtype, for those who don't know, of body dysmorphic disorder. And that was a big part of the reason why I'm currently doing the work I'm doing today, which is wanting athletes to flourish in sport and life and thrive in sport and life and it not be a part of their life that is over consuming or all consuming and overtakes other parts of their life. So yeah, I've always struggled with my body image. I wouldn't say it's perfect now. I don't think that's I don't think we ever reach this perfect body image. But yeah, I've been an athlete.
Right?
Yeah,
What
well, what is
is it?
perfect? Exactly. Define it. It's not really anything. We can certainly have a more positive body image, and we can certainly have a more negative body image, and it's certainly a lot more positive than it was. So yeah, I used to spend a lot of time looking at my body in the mirror. Where did it stem from? I think there's a massive culture in the athletic population in different sports, obviously certain sports more than others, and also in the fitness space, because I think they're slightly different and also related, the athletic world and the fitness space and the fitness community, which I've been in both. Where
It's
thinner,
harsher in your experience.
which one's harsher?
Yeah.
It depends which way we're going at. If there's more pressure probably in the athletic world, and it depends on the sport you play, and it depends on the significance of that sport in your life. If you're a professional athlete and your job is your sport, and on a weekly basis you're having body fat testing, you're having a nutritionist come in and give you a specific meal plan and whatever, then there's going to be a massive part of your identity that is that sport, which is almost put on you because it's also your employment. So it's all of a sudden combined in, multiple parts of your life are combined into that sporting bubble. We see the same in fitness, where people have a big identity revolved around fitness, and they go into becoming a fitness instructor or personal trainer or nutritionist, and they go down that route. So I guess there is similarity, and maybe it's also their source of income. And I know that there's a paper out there, I forget the authors of it, who talk about the pressure that, say, personal trainers will be under for their body to be their business card. The title of the paper is something along those lines: the pressure to look a certain way, to sell yourself to get clients, because we know that a lot of clients in the general population are wanting a change in their body composition or the way they perceive their body to be, and we know that there's better ways to do that in terms of the psychological work, but most people don't know that, understandably, because it's not something that's taught. So yeah, I don't know which one's harsher. I don't think it would be fair to say one's a bigger problem than the other. But I think they're slightly different. We see a lot of people where the fitness space, is maybe they're involved in fitness, but it's another part of their life. Whereas with professional athletes, we often see a bigger part of their life, because of the potential that's their salary is coming from.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Body. And there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of specific pressures involved in athletics, particularly professional athletes, where if they're injured or if they're not performing well, that can bring about its own problems. So we see athletes have a lot of specific problems and pressures and stresses to deal with. But I don't want to say that excludes the fitness space from that as well, because there's also specific stresses in the fitness space as well. I was meant to be talking about my story, and we've gone.
Yeah, I'm curious, like, if you don't mind sharing, like, what age roughly do you remember either looking in the mirror and disliking your body, and going on a diet or fucking with your food somehow, basically, to try and change something?
Sure. The body came first, and actually I think it was more through exercise rather than food that I tried controlling how I looked. But it's hard to put an age on it. But I remember being maybe I wouldn't say. Oh, do you know what? I remember in primary school, and this is going to sound ridiculous, but every time we used to get changed for PE in our classrooms, and it wasn't a common problem here, but just from a cultural perspective, I can start thinking about, crikey, that's so young. We'd get changed for PE in our classrooms, and I remember every time I take my top off, I just suck my belly in, and I look around, a lot of the other boys were doing the same thing. We're sucking our belly in, really weird. Anyway, I wouldn't say that, that was maybe year 4. I wouldn't say that my body obsession started then. There would have been a lot of factors then that maybe were precipitating factors that maybe led to it and allowed.
Yeah, there was something there already. I mean, unconscious bias, because otherwise you wouldn't have even done that.
Yeah. So what was driving me to do that, right? So, and I know in secondary school there was points where I would examine my body a lot. I went to an all boys school, so there was a lot of masculinity was involved a lot, and peacocking, I guess, not really amongst myself as much actually, but you internalize it a lot. And I remember just spending a lot of time at home staring at my body in the mirror, critiquing it, I'd spend hours looking at it from different angles. The mirror was this thing that could just eat me up massively. And that went on up until maybe a couple of years ago, where I would say that I spent a lot of time in the mirror. And I remember just not having an ability to go on holiday without knowing there was a way of me exercising and a facility for me to challenge my muscles. And I had this, and I know that it's relatable to some people because I've spoken to other people, but I had this thing where I wanted to be big but also lean. So I was incredibly dissatisfied with my arms. I couldn't go to the gym and not finish with like an arm pump, just because I'd chase the feeling of walking out the gym and feeling that my arms were slightly bigger. And filling out your t-shirt a bit more or whatever. And I remember getting a bit bigger actually, and getting a lot of praise, or not a lot of praise, but a lot of that just tiny bit of validation that was lasted seconds, but was like a little dopamine hit in your head of like, brilliant. Someone went, oh, your arms are looking bigger. They wouldn't ever follow anything up after that, but that little thing would go spark me. And then even if someone else was complimented, so like my friend was complimented on his arms, let's say, that made me feel rubbish that I wouldn't get a compliment on my arms, but that person did. So there was a huge amount of comparison, which I think is normalized in an all boys school, is normalized, and also in a sporting culture where you're in a changing room full of other people who have different bodies, and you're all getting undressed, and there's that body image threat that comparison brings about. And when did this all change? Well, I did my master's in human nutrition, and for my research project, I looked at intuitive eating and the effects that intuitive eating can have on people who have dieted in the past. Now, for those who are listening, I'm sure there's not many, to be fair, because I'm sure the people that listen to this podcast have heard of intuitive eating. But if they haven't, it's not simply not tracking calories or just eating what you want. It's more of an active, positive approach to eating. Which has been around for sort of 25, 30 years now. And
that was born with, may I add.
Which we were born with, right? About it. And if you're someone who was breastfed, you cried when you needed breastfeeding and you stopped when you were full and satisfied. And at some point we go away from the ability to eat when we're hungry and stop when we're full and make choices that we want. And a lot of, I think, the diet culture does obviously have a lot to answer with regard to that, and that's one of the reasons that we go away from this ability to eat intuitively. But anyway, I learned about intuitive eating. It was something I hadn't learned about. It was something I'd never heard of. I listened to a podcast, I think it was Dr. Fundero spoke about it anyway, and she spoke about it really concisely, and how it is different to the absence of tracking, and how it's this positive model to help people improve their relationship with food and come back in tune with their hunger and fullness signals. And it was correlated with a decrease in disordered eating and body acceptance and body respect and all these other principles and fantastic things that it's involved with. And I thought, wow, I mean, that's not something I've ever done. I'm so at the opposite end. I'm so constantly thinking about food and making sure I've got the right amount. Am I eating enough protein? Is it spread out throughout the day enough? And that was probably somewhat exacerbated by my undergraduate degree in sport and exercise science, where I was learning about the optimum ways to fuel yourself in terms of sports nutrition and the optimum ways to eat if you want to perform in this way and whatever. And it's all good having those optimum ways, but if you're binge eating,
you're not a machine either.
You're not a machine. You're so right. And if we're human beings, and you might be able to do that for a certain period of time, and then it's followed by binge eating, it's followed by something, and actually, or it's having some sort of negative psychological impact. And after some point, there's a dam that, it's like a dam that builds up with pressure and is going to give, and that could be binge eating, or it's a dam that doesn't give and builds up, and other psychological problems or physical problems arise as a result. Maybe it's due to underfueling or overtraining or whatever it could be. But anyway, I discovered the intuitive eating. I did my research project on it, and I interviewed people who are currently eating intuitively and following a non-diet method. And I found it just really interesting to hear the way that they sort of transformed their relationship with food. I thought, wow, do you know what? Maybe I'm quite disordered in the way I'm doing things. It sort of brought that to light to me. So I went on this journey of learning how to eat intuitively, and it massively has helped my body image. It's massively helped my relationship with food. I feel like I am at a place where I'm a lot more at peace with my body. I'm a lot more at peace with my food. My body weight has stabilized. I was certainly at a too low a body weight for what I should have been in terms of my genetic blueprint. So my body weight stabilized. I feel happy. I perform fairly well in my sport. I don't play international level anymore, which is, I'm about to say, is a conscious decision, but also who knows whether or not I'd be good enough. So I can't say it's a conscious decision. But yeah, I don't want to play international sport anymore because there's a lot of other parts of my life that I value, which were hidden or taken up by this disordered eating and obsession with my body. And I love the intuitive eating model, but, and this isn't me dissing the model, it didn't feel like it was meant for me as an athlete. It wasn't designed towards me. It was designed towards chronic dieters, which I did fit because I dieted and restricted my eating to control my body for a long time. But my population and the athletic population, I saw there was some things that didn't quite marry up with how I would live my life or the values I have as an athlete or fitness enthusiast. And so I was like, right, how can I take this model that I've benefited from, and how can I put some twists on it such that it would be suited towards people who are, who classify themselves as athletes or fitness enthusiasts, which is what I would classify myself as, because I don't want sport to not be a part of my life. I love sport. I'm so pro it, and I'm so pro exercise, and I'm so pro moving your body. I'm not pro is it taking over your life and it becoming slightly disordered. So how can I create a model that's going to take this intuitive eating and adapt it and add some more stuff in that's going to be specific to that population and help them develop a healthy relationship with food and body? And that's where I'm at right now, is trying to create this model, which I'm going to call the Flourishing Athlete model, to do that. So yeah.
And I've got questions about that, but before I will go into that, I just want to go back to what you were saying in the fitness world, because I think you know my story. I also am still in love with fitness and I train hard and I love that feeling, but it's from a different place now. It's not from the place that I used to be at. It's so effing normal in the not all fitness worlds, and it's, this is just what I experience, and I've said this on podcasts before. I've had anorexia nervosa, and the fitness world fucked me up more than the anorexia, because at least with the anorexia, you just wanted to be skinny and not eat. Whereas, as you know, the fitness world, it's not just being lean, it's then building shoulders and building glutes. And then, oh my God, everything that comes with that. I was at the gym, you can relate, 3 hours a day, before work, after work, on gym chats, consumed my whole entire life. And I was in the bulimia, and people didn't know that, but they were praising me every day about my six pack. And I had no period, no energy, no sex drive, but I look good. Like,
yeah. And I'm a big fan of the idea that behaviors are not really positive or negative. We often label behaviors in a good thing, and it probably comes from the majority of the population. The fact that we've got a relatively inactive population, people then go, okay, so exercise is good. Up to a point. Nothing's really good or bad, because it depends on what your intentions behind the
I love that you've said that. I just want to reiterate, I love that, because you're right. And then I'll let you continue. Like, dieting isn't an action, it's a state of mind, meaning I could eat a pint of Ben and Jerry's and not be binging, or I could choose not to eat chocolate and eat a salad and not be restricting either, because it's all what's going on in here.
Yeah, absolutely. People often have this misconception with intuitive eating. They hear it and they hear one of the principles being food neutrality, unconditioned permission to eat, and the idea of there not being these good or bad foods, and allowing yourself access to foods that you otherwise maybe thought you shouldn't have, or that had a certain morality, or that you labelled as treats, or you labelled as off limits somehow. And yet, whilst we're doing that, I might also, people would think that, okay, because you're doing that, well, surely you just eat chocolate all day. You just have the foods that you once didn't allow yourself. And initially that might be part of it, overeating the foods that you haven't allowed yourself. But you get to a point where actually, I always give this example. I went to London with my was about to say fiance. The word fiance always freaks me out.
Oh, are you not engaged yet?
No, we are engaged. No, we
Oh.
are engaged. She is my fiance. It freaks me out. I don't know why. I don't like the word. Anyway, my partner, I always say partner. My partner went to London. We ate out for 3 meals. For 3 days. 3 meals for 3 days. It was a mad one. It's brilliant though. And then we got back home and we had such an amazing weekend. But I wouldn't say craving is the right word, but I did want fiber. I felt like I hadn't had enough fiber. I could feel it, but I didn't feel like I had optimum energy. I wanted fiber, and I wanted to have more fiber in my diet. I wanted to have more fruit and veg that was boiled for the next few days, and that's not because I had to make up from what I was doing. It didn't come from that place. It came from a place of my body doesn't feel like it's functioning optimally. But I want it to, because I want my body to function optimally, because that's part of body respect, and one of the modules that is key to the model that I've got. And so that's what I wanted to do, and I wanted to honor that. And there's people would have this conception that you would never do that if you were eating intuitively. And when you truly get to a point where you're able to listen to your body, you're not trying to suppress its body weight or increase its body weight beyond what it should be. You're happy to do that, and you're happy to listen to your body and honor what it's saying to you. And so many people are so out of touch with what their body's saying to them because of the culture that you should and shouldn't have certain foods, or that there's a certain morality around these foods. And I'm not saying that is the sole cause of eating disorders, disordered eating, because it's so much more complex than that. But that culture certainly feeds in and perpetuates the issue.
Yeah, wow. I'm so glad you said that, because that is so true. Because you are embodied now, meaning you can understand and feel what your body's telling you or asking for. And then you can honor that if you want to, because you want to feel good. And that's exactly the place that I'm in now. At the beginning, I ate a shitload of chocolate for months and thought I would never stop. But the more I kept allowing and tuning into my body, one day I was like, oh my God, I want a green shake with spinach in it. Specifically, spinach needs to be in it. And then that's when I was like, wow, my body is communicating with me. After I'd got rid of all the rebellion from the restriction, I then started to tune in.
Yeah.
So let's go into your model then, if you don't mind sharing, like what are you creating that's like the baseline of intuitive eating? Like what are you adding in for athletes? Because I'm sure athletes do need to be ensuring they are getting enough carbs and proteins, for example, for fuel, right?
Yeah, spot on, exactly. So there's these small different nuances that I want to add in. So the model is, firstly, I'd like to sort of preface that the model is ever evolving and it is new. I am in the process of creating it and fleshing it out, and we are. I say we because I've had the input of so many other brilliant people who have been kind enough to give their opinion to me. George, who you've had on your podcast, being someone I've had chats with recently and love the work that he does. Anyway, it's currently 6 steps, and I have called these 6 steps what they're called at the moment, but they might change. Anyway, we've got the intuitive athlete as step number 1. So this is the flourishing athlete model, so 6-step model. The intuitive athlete being step number 1, so rejecting the athletic diet culture, understanding the risks that are associated with being strict with your food and trying to tightly control your body composition, overcoming any restriction or binge eating that we might have had, and establishing regular eating patterns, understanding the importance of balance in terms of balanced meals to keep us sustained and nourished and satisfied. And developing an understanding of your internal signals. Now, for some people, that will take longer than others. So this is a model that doesn't have a time frame. It doesn't have because another point about this model, it's a positive model. So that the point, I'm not trying to get people who are struggling with their eating to a neutral relationship with food. The research has shown that intuitive eating, which isn't this model, that's a different model that Evelyn Tribole and Elise Resch created a long time ago, is positive. It has more effects. It has more, how do I say it? It's got more benefit than just getting someone from a disordered relationship with food back to normal. It goes beyond.
Yes.
It's a positive way of relating to food. It's at the other end of the spectrum. It's not neutral, it's positive. And I want this model to be positive, such that if an athlete who isn't struggling with disordered eating at all, or doesn't believe they are, or body image or anything like this, wants to have a positive relationship with food, wants to relate in food that's a good way, I want them to be able to take on this model such that they are preventing themselves from coming into potential harm in the future. So it's preventative as well as curative. Having said this, if someone is underweight, this model does not account for people who are sort of medically underweight. We know as well from atypical anorexia that people can be under their settling point range, and present with the same physical problems that we see with anorexia, but not be classified as underweight. So I appreciate there's some nuance, and I'm appreciating that, and I'm trying to work with that nuance. So anyway, it's a positive model. It's not for people who are currently underweight who need physical intervention for their physical health. We are hoping that people are at a physically healthy point at the moment, but would like to get to a psychologically healthy point from their disordered eating. So we've got the intuitive athlete, step number 1. We've got the confident athlete, and I sort of shrugged a bit there because I'm not 100% sure on the name of this one yet, but this is all to do with body image. So we're trying to create a attitude where we accept, appreciate, nourish, respect our body, rather than sort of scrutinize and criticize and obsess over our appearance. And so a lot of this, we dive into identity in this, athletic identity, how we identify ourselves. We look at negative body image work as well as positive body image work, which are completely distinct constructs. So the positive body image work might be stuff to do with gratitude for our body, functionality, appreciation, social media literacy, and understanding how our environment affects the way that we relate to our body. And also a lot of sport specific stuff, body comparison, the sport that we have, dissociating our body composition from performance. We know that for certain sports that's going to be harder to do, sorry. You know,
like if you're a bikini athlete, then you're screwed.
Well, we can still, it's harder, and I want to label the fact that it's harder, but we can still work on building a positive body image whilst appreciating that the behaviors that we might have to do might still be geared towards changing our body composition. So what I mean by that is, if I was a bikini athlete and I've never heard of body functionality, appreciation, embodiment, positive social media literacy, all of this stuff, I can still do the work on that whilst appreciating that changing my body might have to be the thing that takes me towards my goals. So I want this to be as inclusive a model as possible. There are certain sports, and I'm appreciative that there are certain sports where it's harder to develop what we might call sort of an optimum positive body image. Not that that exists. There are certain sports that are harder to do this because the behaviors that we do, such as weighing ourselves if we're an athlete who's trying to cut weight for a sport, who is a you know, in an aesthetic based sport such as bodybuilding, weighing yourself, tracking your food, these things might be a requirement for your sport. So we also look at our values, expanding our identity outside of just being a bodybuilder, because when we really see this stuff become a problem, and I know I can relate to this, is when the way you appear is massively tied with your sporting performance, and your sporting performance is massively tied with your identity and self-worth. If you believe, and we do this pie chart exercise where, you know, how much importance do we give to winning in our sport, and if it's 95% and your family and your friends and your other hobbies are all shrunk down because this thing is taking over your life, you're massively at risk. So we can do stuff where we can appreciate that people might need to change their body, but how do we make sure that it doesn't overtake their life? And how do we make sure that they are aware of the problems that this could be causing, and they know when to take a step back if needed? So you're right, there are certain sports that are going to be tougher. Endurance-based sports, we see a massive prevalence of eating disorders. Aesthetic-based sports, body weight to power ratio sports. These sports are tougher to incorporate these, but not impossible. And certain parts will be more easy or more accessible to incorporate than others. But we also look at this in the next module, which is the self-aware athlete, where we look at how we understand and accept ourselves. We use a lot of compassionate mind training in this, how we develop a compassionate attitude towards ourselves instead of a criticizing inner critic, you know, a voice that is telling us that we're not good enough.
Which most athletes have, I'm sure, because there's a reason why they're at the top of their game, is because they're determined, they're disciplined, they're driven, and that can be too much.
Oh, absolutely. If we look at personality traits in athletes that are associated with these problems, perfectionism, obsessiveness, competitiveness, self-discipline, and being really driven, having a low self-esteem, genetically being predisposed to feeling negative emotions to a greater A desire to impress or to be seen as hardworking or express your masculinity or femininity in a certain way, or not just those things. This is a non-exhaustive list that I've just given.
Well, you literally described the old version of me in every single way.
Sure, it is, and me as well. You know, I had
Yeah.
this massive desire to be seen as hardworking. I was that
Me
person who
too.
didn't want to leave the pitch first. I had to do another rep when everyone else was tired. I had to be that. And we had a mantra in the sport that I played when I was playing for England Touch. It was better never stops.
Wow.
Never stops. Now, I actually still like this phrase, but I change it to because that for me fed into the idea of not being able to stop training intensely, eating perfectly, trying to be this obsessive athlete about not stopping. Whereas actually I've sort of reframed not stopping as becoming more self-aware, understanding when you need to rest, because this is still becoming a better version of yourself, just a slightly different way of looking at it. So I'm not anti that phrase, but I'm anti the interpretation I had of that phrase at the time. It didn't help me. Not that I knew it at the time. I thought I was a better
Proving,
person.
so it was like, I don't know if you resonate, it was almost like you wanted to prove something to somebody, and if you could suffer, then because then that showed that you're really strong and you can.
Yes.
And it wasn't until through therapy I was like, what the fuck was all that about? And obviously it's driven from low self-worth to try and prove that you're enough.
Spot on. Absolutely spot on. And in that self-aware athlete model, we do a lot around identity, and we do a lot around what our motivations are, a lot around compassion and the different emotion regulation systems of, are we striving here from an insecure place of, actually, if I don't prove myself to be this hardest working person, I'm not masculine, or I'm not a true athlete. And we look at athlete culture. Everyone claps the people who perform the best, rather than people who have certain personality traits that maybe are admirable. So being hardworking is fantastic, and it's going to get you far in life. But equally, if we've got that system switched on as much as possible, we're increasing our risk for having no longevity in a sport, or having no longevity in life, and maybe not flourishing in life, which is what I want the flourishing athlete to be. So we look at the downside, the positive and the downside of different personality traits, and how we can adapt our thinking styles to become a bit more flexible, and to appreciate how we need to manage who we are as a person. So that's a massive module that needs to be fleshed out more, but I'm so excited for.
That sounds amazing.
Then we've got the fueled athlete. Fueled athlete is how do we stick with our intuitive eating principles that we've talked about, whilst actually understanding that it's a sign of body respect to fuel your body before it's about to do intense exercise or any exercise? How do we recover optimally? How do we improve our performance? How do we respect our body's needs? Because if we respect our body, we take time off when we need to. We don't overtrain. We understand when we're doing certain things that maybe are maladaptive or not helpful for us. So the fueled athlete is all to do with, how do we adapt the intuitive eating principles that we talked about? How do we really start adapting this for sport? Because I don't want people to give up their sport. I'm not anti-sport. I'm so pro-sport. I love sport. I love what it gives me in my life. I love fitness. I love exercise. I love all these things. And the bit that I maybe struggle with is maybe the black and whiteness of, and this is incorrect to some extent, so I'm making some judgment, making some sort of, what's the right word? I'm inferring some things here. I'm making I'm inferring some things. We'll stick with that. Intuitive eating could probably be seen as being anti-athletic in some ways, and I'm not saying it is, but people could maybe jump to that decision. If we look at we've got respect your body, that's good. Oh, movement, feel the difference. Movement, feel the difference. I love that, but also, and I think it might put an athlete off trying to do intuitive eating if they see movement, feel the difference. I think it can be adapted, and that's what I try and do with the next step as well. I think it can be adapted, but I don't want athletes to be put off by this. Instead, we need to listen to our body, and we need to respect our body, and we need to understand our body's needs as a person as well as an athlete. Because no athlete is not a person. You're a person first. And I this is very much a person first approach. And I believe that by taking a person first approach, you'll also become the best athlete that you can be as well. So then we have I've termed it again, I'm not sure about the name, but the mindful athlete. And this is all about reconnecting with playful movement. It's not about stopping intense movement. It's not about that, but it is about understanding why you got into sport in the first place. And I go back to when I was young and I was in school and I'd play in the playground. I'd have a run around with my mates, and we'd chuck a rugby ball about or kick a football about. And there was no focus on body composition, absolutely none. It was on enjoyment of what we were doing. It was on movement. It was on focusing at the task on hand. It was completely mindful. The hour lunch break went like that. It was brilliant fun. It was a part of the day that I look forward to. And that's what sport can be. And that's really powerful. And I want athletes, even if you have to do your fitness stuff to get to play your sport. You know, when I was playing at the England touch rugby, it's very fitness orientated, the sport. You can't do that sport without doing some.
Can't be blowing out your arse when you're trying to run somewhere to. I'm guessing you touch someone. You need to be fit if you're going to enjoy the sport, right?
Absolutely, yeah, right. And I enjoyed the sport when I was fit as well, because it allowed me the capacity to enjoy that. And the sport was a massive value in my life, still is. So it aligned with my values to want to be fit for that sport. Where I got a bit lost was thinking that I needed to look away in order to be fit to enjoy the sport. And there's a subtle difference there. And I'm not saying that body composition never comes into things, because that's also naive. But I bet there's more to it than you think. So with touch rugby, I had to have good skill levels, good decision making, good tactical awareness of the game. I had to be fast, had to be powerful, as well as have good endurance. But none of those actually require me to look a certain way.
No.
It might be tougher if I'm carrying excess body fat. I appreciate, because this will be other people's argument, who is an athlete. It might be tougher if I'm carrying excess body fat to have the endurance aspect. But also, it will be harder to suppress. It will be harder to train with the intensity you require to become good at your sport if you are suppressing your calorie intake and not fueling yourself appropriately, and training a way that is only geared towards burning calories or controlling your body composition. You're more likely to get injured, spend more time missing your sport, be preoccupied with food, miss out on social occasions, which I'm guessing the sport gives you some of. So what I'm saying is there's a massive negative to also trying to focus or overly focus on controlling our body composition when there's so many other aspects to a lot of sports. And the sports that are focused more on controlling body composition, it is tougher to develop this model, but it's not impossible. There are ways around it. I want it to be inclusive to those sports too. So bodybuilding, sure, it's tougher because it is an aesthetic based sport, is a body image based sport.
Yeah.
A body appearance based sport, should I say, rather than body image. But there's still principles that we can, you know, Arnold, back in the days, if we go back a long time, My Fitness Pals have been around for hundreds of years. It's not a requirement to necessarily develop this preciseness around food.
And I wish that I had this model. Sounds incredible when I was stepping on stage, because I didn't have any of this, and I was training at it was an awesome, like, old school bodybuilding gym, which was awesome. The kind of gym which isn't as awesome as I share this back. You'd be doing pull-ups, I would literally pass out and faint, and he'd be like, come on, like, finish your set. And he would just be like, eat chicken and rice with no guidance whatsoever. And that's when my bulimia really started. And then also, as I'm sure you've experienced and clients that you work with, when I was like really lean, like 9% body fat as a woman, until a couple of years ago, every single body type I had after that, I always compared back to the leanest part of me. So even looking normal, my eyes, I was obese or something. And so I wish I had that support, and it's going to be so key for athletes, even if it's just the mindset and the support, understanding that when you're stage lean, that is not sustainable. It's not healthy. If you want that to do as a sport, do it, but we can guide you back to a healthy place.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing is with this is it's so nuanced and there's so many different parts to it. And what you just talked about brings me nicely onto the last module. It was a really nice.
Oh, there's another module.
One
Wow.
more, the robust athlete. And this is actually, a lot of this is psychoeducation. It's about dieting. So this model is predominantly non-diet. I don't follow dieting anymore. I don't need to. The sport that I do doesn't require me to be a certain body weight. However, we have to understand that if someone does truly want to do bodybuilding, they want to be a weight class athlete and box or whatever. Sometimes being a certain body weight is a requirement for the sport. And I do have to take that into account. Whilst I personally am not ever probably going to try and alter my body weight, I very highly doubt it unless I take up a body weight class sport. The robust athlete is all about how do we Who is at a greater risk for dieting? If we've had previous experience of disordered eating, you are at a massively greater risk. What are the problems with dieting? And you've highlighted one of them just there of, actually, when I get really lean, every future self I have the opportunity to compare myself to that past self. And I viewed myself as fat for a lot of my time when I was playing touch rugby. And I can tell you now, I was sort of visible abs lean. And I was under fueling myself massively and over exercising, and I couldn't do a non-intense exercise session. And it's very easy if you do gain a bit of weight through the intuitive eating and you find your natural weight that you maybe are healthier at, to think that you've become fat, and you truly haven't. So we have that body dysmorphia. Not that there's any issue with being fat anyway. Obviously, that's a societal issue.
Oh, I just love your language, because I'm like, yeah, oh no, he's already said what I wanted to say. Exactly, because people have different weight set points anyway. Some people are naturally fatter, naturally, no matter what they do. It's just the body.
Absolutely. And the way I view it is, this is I come up with this analogy. I haven't heard it anywhere else, so if someone else has come up with it before me, you take the credit. But we don't try telling someone to change their height for a sport. We don't say, oh, hang on, my partner's 5 foot. She'll say she's a smidge over. She's lying. She's 5 foot.
And that's tiny.
She won't probably, and I don't want to, I obviously I'm not a fan of telling people you won't be able to do this. Although also part of this, I keep going off on one day. Part of this model is also about being realistic with ourselves, about our genetic blueprint, and not trying to change our genetic blueprint. It will be hard for her to be a basketball player, is what I'm trying to say. She will fully admit she's not going to grow more. And everyone would say it's ludicrous if she tried stretching her body. Everyone would laugh at her. And yet we have this different attitude towards body weight, because it can be changed through physical activity and diet, because it technically can be changed. People have this.
How long for is another matter, right? But
how long for, the extent of which, and how far away we go from our genetic set point, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
Well, we accept it to be something that's doable.
Yeah.
But actually, it comes with so many risks that it's just accepted because it's doable rather than it's preferable. It's not preferable to change someone's height. In fact, it's not even doable. Whereas because it's doable to change someone's body, people think it's something that should be done. And it's not really something that should be done, especially not to extremes. So the robust athlete is understanding, how do we diet if we have to? When do we diet? How do we increase our support system around dieting? It's massively also highlighting the fact that this is a temporary thing. It is understanding...
To get the weight for the sport thing.
Spot on. We'd look at overeating versus undereating, weight gain versus weight loss, because for bodybuilders, they'll go into this off season and they'll try gaining weight to gain muscle. We need to eat in a surplus to gain muscle, and anyway, I'm not going to go down the nutrition of it, but how do we do this as safely as possible? How do we make an informed choice around it? How do we engage the support network? And who is it? Because often I will advise people to get a coach who is intuitive eating or body image or relationship with food informed. So it looks at safe dieting, because for sometimes it is unavoidable, and that is what the robust athlete is about. Hopefully for a lot of people isn't a required module, because they don't feel the need to do it. But for some sports, it's unavoidable if you want to continue in that sport. And therefore, how do we approach it as safely as possible? Because I want this model to be inclusive to all sports. I don't want someone to feel missed out because the sport they do requires a suppression of body weight at a certain specific time.
I love that, because it is all inclusive. It's addressing everything. It sounds freaking awesome. How are you going to be coaching one-to-one? Are you going to be doing groups? Like, how can people access you and this model when it's born, which is very soon, I imagine?
Well, yeah, this is it. So this is the part is I'm fleshing it out. I've got a lot of the structure to it, and that's all good. At the moment, there's this is annoying, but there's no way of accessing it right now. It's not. I want to turn it into a program such that an athlete could go through this model self-paced. I would also like there to be the option of one-to-one coaching in the future. This is all stuff I'm thinking about, how I deliver this model to get its aim, which is to help athletes to flourish in sport and life, through improving their relationship with food and body and themselves. So it's more than an idea, because it's fleshed out. I'm currently in the process of writing I guess you could call them presentations or workshops to go through each phase of this and to help athletes. But I want this to, I have to be careful because I am a perfectionist. I have to come to terms with the fact that I'm a perfectionist. I could spend the next 3 years writing this and never getting it out because of my perfectionistic standards and tendencies. So I need to be careful. But I equally to that, I also want it to be impactful in that I want to help lots of athletes and I want to impact those athletes that I help massively. I want them to feel a change in their life from disordered eating to positive, or from normal eating to positive. And I need to make sure that the workshops do that well. So I'm currently fleshing it out. I want it to be a one-to-one coaching thing that if people want extra support, they can have that with, as well as a program to help athletes. And then I also want to promote the model in the future as well. And these are all ideas, right? I'm really, really early in this. I only launched my Instagram under a week ago. I want to help in schools or in universities or certain, because really, if we want to make the change, it needs to come from the authority figures who are to change the culture of sport and fitness. It's all good helping the athletes, and I want to do that because that's fantastic and that's what I needed. But if we want to prevent this, which I want this to be a preventative thing, we need to infiltrate this into certain sports teams, clubs, and also fitness spaces and communities. And I want that to be what's done with this model. I want it to be the go-to thing for athletes who also want to be psychologically healthy. So currently, if you're interested in this, just drop me a follow on Instagram, and I want to help as much as I can for free on social media. Like, that's currently where I'm at, whilst I flesh this out as a program for athletes to follow and to help those other populations. So, you know, whether it be parents or whether it be coaches or whether it be nutritionists or sports or fitness professionals who work with athletes, so they have an understanding of it.
That's crucial.
That's where we're currently at.
That is so exciting. And by the way, before I ask you another question, have you got about 15 more minutes?
Yeah. You fire away. Absolutely.
Before I ask you the question, may I share a quote about perfectionism?
Please do.
So this is not mine, this is Brene Brown's. And because I'm a recovering perfectionist, by the way.
Sure.
She says, perfectionism is only fear dressed up in high heels and a fur coat.
Yeah, I have heard that before. Yeah. And it's true, isn't it? Really, it stems from a fear. I certainly think it. For me personally, I look back in my childhood where an A wasn't good enough and an A star had to be achieved in order for me maybe to get the praise that I wanted. Because when we're young, we all want praise. That's really normal. It's normal to want praise as adults. So. You know, I see a lot of quotes that I sometimes think are a little bit wishy-washy motivational that aren't actually based in reality. You know, this idea that, you know, you shouldn't try and impress anyone else. You should only love yourself. Well, actually, it's very normal to want to impress others. Might not be helpful, but it's very normal.
Yeah, we're human. Hello, we're human, right? Yeah, let's not pretend we're not.
We exist socially, and protect and being seen as a positive influence on someone else's life by someone else will help our survival from an evolutionary perspective. So of course it's going to make us feel good. So is comparison. Comparison's normal. You know, where they go, I believe that comparison is the thief of joy, that quote, but it doesn't help us address comparison. There's no practicality.
Comparison and judgment is rooted in the brainstem, which is the survival part of the brain. So good luck changing your brainstem.
Yeah, exactly. Good luck changing the millions and well, more than millions of years of evolution that have led us to having the brain that we currently have.
Exactly.
And the compassionate mind training that I'm currently doing a lot of work with actually is addresses a lot of acceptance of these things and working with these things instead of trying to fight against. How do we work with them? So I do agree that quote is quite accurate. It's based in fear, perfectionism a lot of the time. And for me, it was based in fear of not being seen as good enough by others. And the only way I could be seen as good enough by others was by being quote unquote perfect.
Exactly. But this needs to get out in the world. And I don't want this to be a coaching session, obviously, because I want to hear your wisdom, and we have. But from personal experience, having created programs now and, you know, the established coach that I am, get it out there. It's never going to be perfect because not you, but I was selfishly not getting it out there because I wanted it to be perfect and I was missing out on people that needed me.
Yeah. No, you're spot.
Yeah.
It's spot on. And it's a nice way to restructure that belief and that thought is actually this could be impacting people. The aim of this is to impact people. Stop being so selfish with your perfectionism of letting it not impact people, and start being selfless and just get it out there.
But I have a final question for you, if you don't mind sharing. So from your experience and the journey you've been on, were there any things that specifically helped you with your body acceptance and being able to go to the mirror and perhaps not think, wow, I'm so muscly and I look so fit, but just to be like, you know what? It doesn't matter to me anymore and I accept who I am. Like, what helped you get to that place?
So a lot helped me get to that place. There's a lot of different steps along the way.
Yeah.
I did Thomas Cash's I forget the name of the work, because I think it's a 7-step program that he's created, learning to like your appearance or something. So a lot of that to start with, when he talks about his body acceptance, I did a lot of mirror work. I did a lot of neutrality around the way that I view my body and the way I describe my body and relate to my body. And I challenged a lot of the thoughts I had and language that I used. And I also looked at my value. Oh, I've gone on about 3 different things I did there. I also looked at my values.
Great, because it's not one thing, is it? It's a journey.
Oh, absolutely. I had a look at my values a lot and what I actually wanted out of life.
Yeah.
Every time that I caught myself, and I realized the amount of my life that this was almost subconsciously consuming, that didn't really come to light until I looked at it on paper. Like, how much time do you spend thinking about your appearance, worrying about how someone else looks better than you, comparing it to someone else, dieting to control your appearance? And I tallied it all up, and then I looked at the values I had in my life, and I went, there's a massive mismatch here. I'm saying I value these things in this amount of proportion, and I'm not. I'm behaving in a way that doesn't align with this. So every time I go to compare my body, or every time I go to scrutinize it in the mirror, can I be more mindful? Can I develop my mindfulness skills so that I can notice it? I can not judge myself. I can offer myself a bit of a compassionate word. And what am I going to do instead? And so one of the things I did when I went to the mirror, which was a frequent one, I used to be obsessed with, it was always my abs and visible fat around my abs. For me, that was a massive thing. So I'd lift my top up in the mirror and spend a long time obsessing about whether I could see them all, whether or not I had a bit of fat covering the bottom one.
So the lighting has to be right. Yeah.
So every time I did that, I actually stopped and tried listing a few things that I was appreciative of my body doing leading up to that. And and I tried not to repeat myself, but it might be I'm appreciative that I'm able to walk to this mirror to do that. I'm appreciative that I have the eyesight to be able to do that. I'm appreciative that my mind is able to realize what I'm doing, stop me, interrupt me, and redirect me to a different process. So a lot of body functionality appreciation, and also body appreciation. I started following social media accounts that devalued their body and sometimes took the mick out of it. There was this thing where was it Will Smith, where he was sort of posing, where he'd put on some weight, but he was posing to a point of, I'm happy to put this out there. There was a lot of social media, and I forget, I watched an interview with Zac Efron. Was it Zac Efron?
Was he the guy in Baywatch who was so shredded it was almost
painful to see? Yeah, and I really wanted to look like him for a long time. And I watched him, and then he was talking about the problems with him, and now how he's put on some weight and how he's happy. So I surrounded myself with people who were slowly devaluing their body, which is hard to do in a society
that is telling you the opposite and is profiting off your insecurities about said value towards body anyway.
Spot on. So I made a conscious effort to try and listen to the select few who were going the opposite way. I started noticing over a long period of time, the body image sort of intrusive thoughts slowly died down. And as I noticed this, I also tried focusing on what else I'm getting out of my life. So because these are dying down, I'm having better quality time with my partner when I'm asking her about her day, and I'm not thinking about the fact that I'm sat down and I can feel my belly roll over my shorts. And actually, the fact that I'm listening to her, that ties into the value I have of relationships or family or whatever you want to call it. And I'm aligning, the way I'm behaving is aligning with my values slightly more. So value work was massive. Body neutrality and mirror work was big. And then a lot of the positive body image stuff I found so much more powerful, because I'm sure I did a lot of challenging beliefs. I had a lot of beliefs where I can only be happy when I look a certain way. Well, let's actually write that belief down, because I've got that belief. I associate with that quite strongly. Is that actually true? Is there any truth? Was I happier when I quote unquote liked how I looked in this photo. Well, maybe I was for about 3 seconds, 4 seconds. And then unfortunately, the person next to me in the photo had slightly bigger arms and I became quite unhappy. So
Yeah.
actually, I started challenging my beliefs a lot, keeping body image diaries. And I'm not saying all of these things are necessary to improve your body image. It depends on the person. I think they're all good tools to have in your arsenal to pull out maybe when you need. But I don't think it's necessarily required for everyone. But the positive body image work was massive for me. Trying to respect my body, trying to sit down and reflect. Am I hungry? Am I overworked? I need to eat in a way that respects my body. And part of that is listening to when I'm hungry and full up. With intuitive eating, what we talk about, which is primarily based on physical cues rather than emotional. Do I need a rest? Do I need to lie in tomorrow? There's no harm with lying in. You're not being a bad person for not getting up at 5 o'clock and working really hard and getting to the gym. You're allowed to lie in, because if that's what your body needs at this moment, that's a sign of body respect. So it was actively trying to find routines that nourished my body, respected my body, taking the emphasis away from the way it looked and towards treating it well, viewing it, accepting. Challenging my language was a massive part.
Yeah, because your words become, well, there's a reason why we say, how do you spell something? Because you're casting a spell every time you speak. I mean, we can go into another hour conversation about the law of attraction and energy and quantum physics and consciousness and all of that. I don't know if that's your vibe or not, and we won't go there. But when you speak, you're intending something into existence.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're reinforcing, we know that neurons that fire together wire together.
Yeah.
When we're consciously saying things, we are reinforcing beliefs. And even stuff like complimenting others on their appearance, or someone comes on TV and I go, wow, he looks great, or she looks great, or whatever. That's my first judgment on them. How rude of me to objectify that person down to their looks without even knowing anything about them as a person. So starting to just challenge my language and starting to challenge, and I'm very lucky that I've got people around me who are keen on self-awareness and like being challenged on views, or are willing to be challenged on views, and are willing to listen to my views and take them on board, and I'm willing to listen to theirs and take them on board. And I'm a big fan of challenging your pre-existing beliefs. And so I have conversations about it quite frequently at home, which is a positive thing. And so for me, there was a lot of involving other people in it as well, talking to other people about my journey and not trying to just do it alone, and speaking and thinking about the norms that we have and whether or not they're actually healthy or worthwhile following or adhering to. So there was a lot of work in it. There was loads. If I was down one thing that massively helped me as an athlete, it was probably functionality appreciation. And the reason for that is, as an athlete, my body was so capable. I was so lucky to exist in a healthy body, and I took it for granted. And you only realize it when you meet someone who doesn't have a healthy body and you speak to them. And I was very capable with my body. My fitness levels were high because of my sport. My ability to play my sport was fairly good. I didn't appreciate that. All I did was criticize the parts of my body I didn't like, rather than appreciating what my body's doing for me. And I loved the quote, and I'm sort of happy to finish this part of me saying this on this quote of, and it's all to do with embodiment. You spend your life, if you spend your life on the front lawn of your house, criticizing how your house looks, you're going to forget the importance of having a functioning house, of having a functioning kitchen, living in your kitchen, having a comfy bed. And I would rather live in a house personally that functions well for me, that I can live in, rather than, let's say, a pretty house on the outside that has no kitchen inside. It's just gutted. It has no bed. It has no mattress. You've got to sleep on the floor. And that for me is what I was doing. I was neglecting my health and what my body needed, and how I related to my body, for the sake of just how it looked, for the sake of just receiving these temporary feelings of joy from compliments from others that lasted so little, and made my self-worth so contingent on how I looked and what other people thought of me, that I could never develop a self-accepting
attitude. It just keeps fueling the fire, doesn't it, of the validation needed from external, but then you'll never heal from that if you just keep fueling that. And I'm so glad that you are where you are. And I'm very excited for your program to launch, because you're going to help. It's so needed. Used to be an athlete, and now definitely fitness enthusiast for sure, it's needed in this space so much. So I mean, when it's live, obviously I'm going to be sharing, talking about it because it's so needed. So is there anything you would like to leave the listeners with? Any last words of wisdom before we say goodbye?
You know what? I'm going to say no, because I think that we've covered so much, and that last little thing that I talked about there about the house thing probably sums up a lot about moving from a negative body image to a positive body image, and a big jump from looking at your house to living in your house. And I think that sums it up nicely, that I don't want to butcher it with another with another rubbish quote. So I'll leave it at that, I reckon.
Yeah, it was epic. But thank you, Matt, for your time.
I really appreciate it.
And I
Thank you.
can't wait to get this out there. And if anyone wants to reach out to you, they can just DM you. I've obviously put the links below.
Yeah, just the Flourishing Athlete on Instagram at the moment. And yeah, I'd love to meet people. So feel free to reach out. And thank you so much for allowing this conversation to happen. Appreciate it.
You are welcome. All right, listeners, I will see you next time. That's a love.